I discovered 3 haunted spring horror stories that will chill you to the bone. I never should have opened that door. The air was thick, almost suffocating. I stared at the worn handle, aged and rusted, wondering what hidden horrors lay within. My heart thudded violently in my chest. Just moments before, everything felt normal, mundane even. My routine was predictable: coffee brewing, Sunday paper sprawled across the table. But sanity slipped away as I approached that door. The hallway was dim, shadows creeping like hungry cats, curling around my feet and gripping my ankles. The scent of damp earth and decay wafted through the crack beneath the door, sending chills down my spine. I reached for the handle, and a shiver ran through me, electric and unnerving. What was that? A whisper, soft and sinister, seemed to slither through the air. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I strained to listen, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding like a drum. The house creaked as if it were alive, mocking my fear. I should have turned back, but curiosity gnawed at me, urging me on. Suddenly, a cold draft made my skin crawl. A picture frame rattled on the wall, tilting precariously. My heart raced. I took a step back. Then it happened. The door swung open. My stomach dropped as the darkness beyond beckoned me forward, shadows dancing inside like lost souls. A faint glow flared from deep within, almost igniting curiosity, but dread swelled in my chest. What lay in that darkness? The whispers grew louder, echoing my deepest fears. I forced myself to take another step. Sweat dripped from my brow as I crossed the threshold. The chill in the air seeped into my bones. What had I unleashed? Breathless, I attempted to grasp the shapes in the dim glow. Suddenly, something moved. A flash, barely visible, darted just beyond view. I whipped around, but nothing was there. The air grew suffocatingly cold, and I could almost hear the hushed plodding of the shadows. Then, a glimmer of movement caught my eye at the far end of the room. Something, or someone, was emerging. Panic surged. My gut twisted with fear. I wanted to scream, to flee, yet my feet felt glued to the floor. That I took a shaky breath, preparing to confront whatever haunted me. The figure grew clearer, and then, a piercing scream erupted in the silence, echoing off the walls. The shadows surged toward me, swallowing the light, merging into a swirling void that I couldn't escape. My blood turned to ice as the door slammed shut behind me, cutting off my only hope for escape. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The door slammed, the sound reverberating through the darkness like a death knell. I whipped around, heart racing, eyes wide with terror. The air felt denser now, saturated with despair, as if the very walls were weeping for what had been lost within them. I pressed my back against the cold, unyielding surface of the door, desperately seeking comfort in something solid, but the chill seeped through, chilling me to the core. As I turned again, my breath released in a shaky puff, dancing in the frigid air. The space before me was a hollow shell of a room, the faint glow revealing crumbling plaster and rotting wood, remnants of a time long forgotten. An unnerving stillness enveloped the space, yet I could feel the presence of something lurking just at the edge of perception. The whispers drifted closer, more distinct now. Words I could not comprehend spun in a diabolical chorus, scratching at the surface of my mind. Leave, go back, they seemed to plead, but the urgency only fortified my resolve to delve deeper. With every step forward, shadows seemed to ripple, curling around my ankles before retreating to the corners. In the dim light, a small table came into view, its once polished surface now marred by years of neglect and despair. Something lay upon it, an object veiled beneath a tattered cloth. Compelled by an unseen force, I approached, heart pounding so loudly I feared it would drown out the whispers that I hesitated a moment, then gripped the edge of the fabric, yanking it aside. The object was a mirror. The glass was smeared with grime, and black stains edged the frame like veins of a decaying creature. Yet as I squinted at my reflection, I realized that the figure wasn't entirely my own. The edges warped and distorted, shadows shifting like a fog across its surface. I leaned closer, entranced. Suddenly, the reflection morphed, a figure materialized behind me, a gaunt, pale woman, her hair wild and deep shadows hanging under her eyes, as if she had stared into eternity and lost herself to it. Panic surged as I spun on my heel, but there was nothing there, only the quiet hum of the room, the air growing heavier with dread. My pulse thundered in my ears as I turned back to the mirror. The woman was still there, staring back, a sadistic smile creeping toward her lips. I stumbled back, hitting the wall with a thud. In that moment, the whispers amplified, a cacophony of despair and malice surrounding me, making it impossible to think. "Help me," her voice crooned, a blend of agony and pleading. Before it's too late, I spun to face the room again. What was too late? The pulsating dark thickened, wrapping around me like vines on a grave. I could feel it suffocating, dragging the very breath from my lungs. Just as I began to grasp a shred of understanding, the voices fell silent, the air crackled with electricity. An unearthly stillness settled in, and my skin tingled as though I were being watched. I felt the weight of a multitude of eyes narrowing upon me. Panic rose like bile, and for an instant, I wanted nothing more than to scream. Footsteps echoed from the shadows, slow and deliberate, like the ticking of a clock counting down the moments to dread. They approached, each step sending shivers racing down my spine. I couldn't breathe, my mind raced what would be revealed in the darkness, and then it appeared, a horrid face pressed against the mirror's surface, twisted in rage and despair, its eyes pulsing with a malevolent glow. It was not the woman, but something else, something grotesque, leering back at me with a promise of suffering. I was trapped in its reflection, and I could sense its intentions. The whispers returned, louder than ever, now insistent and cruel. "Join us." The air shimmered, and I felt an icy hand latch onto my wrist, just as the lights flickered and the walls started to close in. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by an ancient darkness. The mirror cracked, the shards fracturing reality itself, and as the glass splintered, the last thing I saw was the maddened glee reflected in that deformed face before it shattered into a million pieces, each one whispering my name. As darkness enveloped me, I was plunged into an abyss of shadows, and above me, I could hear it, the door creaking open once again. But this time, it was not a call for help that beckoned me forward, it was an invitation into the void, and I was powerless to refuse. The darkness held me tight, a suffocating embrace that robbed me of time and space. I barely registered the sensation of falling, plummeting through a formless void. The names whispered in unison, calling me deeper. My screams echoed long after my voice vanished, dissolving into silence. But as suddenly as it had begun, I landed with a violent thud on the cold, damp earth. A pungent smell filled the air, a mixture of decay and something metallic. Groggily, I pushed myself upright, struggling to clear the fog in my head. Around me, the landscape stretched into shadows, twisted trees clawing at a starless sky, gnarled branches shadowing the ground like skeletal fingers. The remnants of the mirror clung to me, shard-like memories of that agonizing face and the torment it promised. I instinctively reached for my wrist, trembling at the phantom touch that had anchored me here. I found nothing but a bitter chill running like ice through my veins, as if the hand that had grasped me still lingered in the space between reality and nightmare. Tentatively, I stumbled forward, each step a reminder of my isolation. The landscape curled and twisted, revealing pathways that seemed to breathe beneath my feet, warping and shifting with an unseen sentience. In the distance, faint glimmers of light flickered, almost as if they were taunting me with glimpses of hope, but the hope turned quickly to dread as I approached one of the eerie lights. It revealed itself to be an open grave, the earth freshly disturbed, mounds of dirt piled haphazardly around the gaping void. I leaned closer, horrified. A stale smell erupted from the hole, and through the darkness, I could almost hear rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat. It called to me, each pulse echoing the fear in my heart. What lay beneath was no longer a mystery, I could sense it, something waiting, something hungry. Suddenly, a voice cut through the air, a croaky whisper echoing my own name. "Help me, please help me." It was hauntingly familiar, and my heart raced with recognition. I scrambled back, eyes wide. The voice belonged to the woman from the mirror. But this time, she was not alone. Emerging from the boughs of twisted trees, shadows began to materialize, figures that flickered in and out of existence, faces contorted in expressions of unbearable anguish. Their hands stretched toward me, grasping and clutching, their eyes glistening with the same desperation I'd heard resonates in their collective cries. "Join us, join our chorus." The ground quaked beneath me as one of the shadows broke free from the others, stepping closer. Its form was indistinct, but two luminous eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. "You must become one of us," it hissed, the voice slithering like a serpent through the stale air. "You heard her, she is lost. Only you can guide her home, home." I echoed, the words tasting of ash. How could I guide anyone when I could scarcely hold on to my own sanity? Yet something bound me to the man, irresistible force drawing me closer to the gaping maw of the grave. The darkness that surrounded me pulsed, alive and eager, and I felt its dreadful hunger wrap around my mind. I glared into the depths, the world rotating with dizzying speed as an image for me, a reflection but not mine. The pale woman, now standing beside me, her sadistic smile morphing into a frown. Then I realized the figures weren't just echoes, they were souls caught between realms, lost until someone could take their place. Just as I began to comprehend the horror that awaited, the air around me shifted, thickening into an iron grip. Shadows swirled, and without warning, a skeletal, bony hand shot up from the grave, clawing at the earth as if seeking to break free. I froze, heart pounding against my ribcage as more hands emerged and the voices crescendoed into a deafening scream. "Join us! Join us!" They cried in haunting unison, the power of their need propelling me toward the edge of that trench. I struggled, desperate to turn away as the earth trembled more violently, shaking the very essence of reality. And then, amidst the chaos, the unmistakable face of the pale woman appeared once more in the swirling shadows, beckoning me closer. "It's you or me," she whispered. "Choose." In that pivotal moment, the ground split wide open to reveal an unending, swirling darkness that beckoned with insatiable hunger. I was no longer an observer, I was the next sacrifice, and with every shred of my being I screamed, grasping for escape, heart racing wildly as the world around me began to dissolve into darkness, leaving only my voice echoing in the void. "Please, no." Then silence. The silence was an unyielding void, wrapping around me like a shroud. I felt the remnants of my own scream dissolve into the nothingness as the ground beneath me pulsated with an awakening force. Where the grave once loomed, I could now see a narrowing tunnel stretching into unfathomable depth, its walls slick and glistening, a curious blend of earth and something more grotesque, flesh, perhaps. My pulse thudded in my ears, a frantic metronome urging me to flee from the horrifying landscape. Yet I was paralyzed, held captive by the echoes of their voices, now quieter but still whispering promises of companionship, of safety. "You're not alone," they cooed softly, their words like a caress on my skin, drawing out the very essence of my fears. "Join us, free yourself from the pain. We just want to play." With a surge of adrenaline, I broke from my stupor and lurched backward, my foot stumbling against the slick earth. I fell hard, landing upon something unexpectedly solid within the murky mud. My heart leaped as I turned to find a bone protruding from the ground, encrusted with dirt yet unmistakable in its form. The remains of the forgotten, abandoned within this graveyard of lost hopes. "Join us," the figures wailed once more, their spectral hands now smeared with dark ichor, eager to pull me to their ranks. There was more than mere desperation in their pleas, it was anguish, a deep torment that twisted through my gut with a vice-like grip. I struggled to comprehend the horrors that lurked out of reach, desperate to find refuge from their relentless grasp. Rising to my feet, I strained to catch my breath, now acutely aware of the sensations that enveloped meth cold, the decay, the rancid aroma of despair. It screamed of something ancient, a furious yearning that seemed to seep through the earth itself. Whether it was the darkness or the burden of those lost souls weighed heavily upon me, I could not tell. I stumbled forward, my eyes darting between the shadows, each flicker illuminating the lengths of agony etched into their fading visages. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed from the trees, a snapping of branches like the bones of a long-buried creature being disturbed. I froze, sensing a tremor deeper than the ones that had been rattling the ground. From behind a thicket of brambles and vines, a figure emerged, tall and dark as midnight. The air around it warped, a silhouette adorned with a cloak made from the very shadows that danced at its feet. Its presence brought a chilling calm that froze me in my place. "Leave this place," it boomed, its voice resonating like thunder beneath the earth. The shadows recoiled, hissing, retreating into the darkness as though intimidated by its arrival. But there was something unnerving about this Antitia kind of authority that felt both compelling and malevolent. The pale woman's image flickered before me again, her ghostly fingers extending toward me, urging. "You don't have to listen to it. The shadows mean you harm. You are mine," she breathed, the words curling into my mind like smoke. Confusion doused me in a wave of ice. Who was truly my ally here? What did they want from me? As the dark figure stepped closer, I felt its intent like a weight pressing down upon my chest. "You must leave now," it insisted, and the ground shuddered beneath its command, the air thickening to suffocation, and then I saw Ida movement at the very edge of my vision. The hands reaching from the grave extended further, fingers clawing not just for me but for the dark creature now challenging them. It did not belong to the lost souls, it was something infinitely more sinister. With a dreadful realization washing over me, I understood that I was now the focal point of this malevolent confluence of forces. The shadows rallied, their cries piercing the stillness, merging into a cacophony as the ground split further. Darkness surged, expanding, threatening to swallow everything in its insatiable maw. "Make your choice." The dark figure roared, as shadows writhed and curled in frantic abandon. The pale woman's gaze was a desperate plea, a wish for salvation, but behind her, the chorus of shadows sang a song of madness, luring me deeper into the pit. With every ounce of will I could muster, I gasped, "I don't know. I don't know what to choose." Just then, a bony hand breached the surface fully. It clasped onto my ankle with a grip of pure ice, dragging me closer to the edge of that bottomless pit. Struggling to break free, my voice was lost in the fray, swallowed by the torment that pierced the air. The dark figure surged toward me, desperation clawing at its form. "Only one will survive," it bellowed, but the words seemed to fall away in the chaos around me. As the abyss yawned wider, I realized I had only seconds to make a choice, with no clear path to salvation. But one truth twisted through the mayhem: whatever I decided, it would not be without a cost. And with a solid grip on my leg, the gaping darkness surged around me, ready to claim its next victim. As I wrestled against the inevitability of my fate, the darkness whispered a terrifying promise. "Embrace me and you might just save them all." Then, without warning, I fell. The world twisted around me as I plummeted into the void. The sensation of falling morphed my screams into shivers that echoed through the thickening air. I was ensnared in a whirlwind of shadows and flesh that clawed at my consciousness, wrapping me in a suffocating embrace. Each ragged breath I took filled my lungs with the taste of frostbite and despair. Just as I felt the darkness envelop me completely, a cruel wind swept through, spinning my descent into a frenetic current that forced my eyes open. Below me, a land of writhing appendages and gaping, empty maws awaited my arrival, all pulsating with an atrocious life of their own. I instinctively curled into a ball, fearing the moment I would meet that grotesque ground, but there was no choice. I was bound to land among the horrors of that abyss. With a bone-crunching impact, I collided with the ground, the shock reverberating through my body. The darkness around me vibrated in delight, responding to my presence like a long-lost lover waiting in ardor. I forced myself to sit up, my heart pounding as I took in my surroundings: a vast expanse of marshy terrain punctuated with skeletal remnants and twisted trees, their branches scraping against one another like accusatory fingers. The air was thick with whispers rife with the sorrows of the damned. A sense of impending dread settled over me like a weight, but even in despair, a flicker of absurd hope ignited. I had survived the plunge. I rose shakily to my feet and glanced around, straining to identify any sign of the dark figure and the pale woman who had been my companions in this nightmarish dance. Their silhouettes were nowhere to be seen. Instead, I felt the prickle of something else, the presence of a multitude of eyes watching from the inky recesses of the abyss surrounding me. They glimmered faintly, like the last hints of starlight trapped in a well of trepidation. Then came the voices, overlapping like a terrible symphony. Welcome, come play with us, join our feast, it's time to eat, why not open your heart to the void? Muffled laughter welled up from the ground itself, clawing at my resolve. My gut twisted as I staggered back, realizing that the ground was undulating beneath me, a living entity alive with anticipation. It sank low, then surged upward, almost as if trying to pull me into its depths. That I, in frantic survival instinct, I turned, stumbling into the oppressive darkness that wrapped around me, entangling my limbs. My thoughts spiraled. I needed to escape. I needed to find a way back to the surface, but that was not possible. Every step seemed to draw me deeper into the shadowy embrace of this dread paradise where the rules twisted with each breath. As I scoured the marsh for an exit, the whispers grew louder, heating to a fevered pitch until I could hear individual fragments of laughter and sobs. It can't be true. You left us. They cried, pulling me toward silhouettes I could only partially discern. Tormented faces began to materialize from the darkness, lost souls begging for release. Eyes wide with terror and mouths stretched in agony, they reached for me as if I were their final hope. Tremors coursed through me as I recognized the faces of the Longanith children, the lovers, the ones who had gone missing in this very realm. One child, no older than 5, wore a pale face marred with streaks of dirt and tears. "Help us," she chimed, her eyes wide and pleading. "You can't leave us here." I staggered back, overwhelmed by dread and guilt, heart racing as I grasped the enormity of their suffering weighed against my own struggle for survival. I didn't have the power to free them. How could I even begin to understand their torment? "Join us," they urged again, their voices melding into one chorus that wrapped around me, offering comfort with an undertone of desperation. As I turned to flee, the ground convulsed violently beneath my feet, sending me tumbling into the marshy muck. My hands plunged into the soft earth, but instead of solid ground, I felt something pull at my fingers, wrapping around them like wet vines, latching onto my soul. Bile rose in my throat as I tried to yank myself free, but it only drew me deeper into a hungry maw of despair. A howl of anguish ripped through the darkness as shadowy figures emerged, a grotesque multitude fueled by a monstrous wish for respite. The hands that had been beckoning me from the earth shattered free, seizing my limbs, pulling me deeper into their nightmarish playground. Thunder cracked, a violent echo that silenced the cacophony for a moment. The dark figure loomed ahead, its shadow pulsating wildly, drawing strength from the chaos. "The time is near, you may yet decide," it snarled, and the air shimmered like an omen, thick with dread. But as I strained to respond, a sudden intuition surged through me, a low whisper like the rush of a cold wave at my back. The pale woman emerged, her form flickering like a dying flame. "You must choose quickly. Choose to save them, or choose to save yourself." I felt the ground tremble with impatience, shadows writhing in a frenzy around me, ready to close in. I was trapped, tethered between ghostly pleas and my own desperate instincts to survive. And then, in that terrible moment of clarity, as I grappled with the idea of allegiance, I heard something new, the unmistakable sound of a heartbeat reverberating through the echoes. It rose and fell, steady and demanding, echoing not just through the abyss but from within me. In that heartbeat, a chilling revelation flickered alive: the choice would not be without its own bloody sacrifice. With fear twisting in my belly, I held my breath. As I gazed into the ever-shifting void of shadow yawned around me, I realized that my choice would define who I would become in this nightmare. And then, the heartbeat faltered, stopped altogether. I could feel the ground shift yet again, the pull of its hunger tugging insistently, as the darkness writhed with eager anticipation. Time slipped away from me like sand through a sieve, leaving me poised on the edge of an unspeakable choice, when all at once the shadows lurched forward, demanding an answer, a decision right then and there. In that unbearable moment, I understood, nothing would ever return to normal after today. Then the shadows surged toward me, and I was thrust into their relentless grasp, forcing the question from my lips. But I could only hope to speak my truth before the world around me swallowed everything whole. The world around me exploded into chaos as the shadows consumed me, an endless sea of writhing darkness layering over every thought and breath. I couldn't focus on the voice of the pale woman or the cries of the wretched soul. It was all swallowed by an overwhelming sound, a cacophony of shrieks and moans, each distinct yet woven together in a macabre symphony that reverberated in my skull. Lightning illuminated the scene briefly, casting jagged images across my vision. The skeletal trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches gnarled and searching like the fingers of the dead desperately grasping for something lost. And amid the horror, a faint glow flickered, a shimmering light, hovering just beyond the reach of the shadows, beckoning me with an unfathomable allure. "Save them or save yourself," the dark figure thundered, its voice now an echoing growl that clawed at my insides. It shifted closer, an avalanche of swirling darkness, pressing against my mind. I could feel the pulse of the heartbeat, resonating through the very marrow of my bones, both mine and something else, a relentless thrum that nudged me toward this light, promising safety. As I teetered between the grasp of shadows and the allure of that incandescent hope, panic morphed into resolute clarity. Behind me, the spirits shrieked, their faces contorted in anguish. "Choose. You can't abandon us." They howled, their desperate entreaties slicing through the chaos. But beneath those cries, there existed a deeper terror, one that crept into my mind with a cold whisper. Perhaps I was meant for this suffering, destined to be entangled with it in ways I hadn't comprehended. I turned back to the light, taking a hesitant step toward it as the ground convulsed violently beneath me, suddenly pulling away from the vile earth in a desperate bid for my presence. There was still a shred of hope. If I could reach that light, if I could break free from this unholy abyss, then maybe, just maybe, I could escape this fate. But the shadows had no intention of letting me go so easily. With a ferocious roar, they erupted around me, coiling tightly around my limbs, suffocating me in a madness that threatened to drown my sanity. Faces swirled in the darkness, taunting, pleading, gnashing their teeth in fury. I was now the nexus of their despair, the fulcrum upon which their existence teetered. "Embrace us," they cried, their voices layer upon layer of agony melding into one haunted hymn that echoed like thunder. "You are one of us," my heart raced, the light now an indifferent sphere of promise, an unreachable salvation. I didn't want to stay here, to join them in this purgatory masquerading as a dream. My thoughts raced as I resisted their gravitational pull, my fingertips grazing the cool essence of the light. I felt warmth spread through me, illuminating the fear and dread tangled within my very core. The heartbeat was no longer faint, it was a drum, a relentless march that drove me forward. As I lunged toward the light, I felt the shadows writhe violently, their grip tightening, pulling me back as laughter erupted around me, cruel and mocking, promising despair. Suddenly, the pale woman reappeared, her face twisted with urgency. "You need to choose now," she shouted over the tumult, her voice breaking the reverberating melody of despair. I met her eyes, desperately searching for answers. "You can't save them all. You have to choose one choice, one life." I felt the weight of the decision constrict around my chest, the desperation clawing for release. I wavered, caught between the essence of the living and the desperate cries of those lost souls. The light flickered, and for a heartbeat, it dimmed, a warning of impending sacrifice. In that moment of indecision, the ground beneath me gave a horrifying lurch, unveiling a chasm that oozed darkness, the abyss opening wide, a maw eager to swallow me whole. My feet slipped deeper into the mire, and in an instant that felt stretched through eons, I realized the struggles, the pleas, the sacrifices, they all converged into one screaming moment of truth. Then, the shadows intensified, crashing forward, a wall of darkness aiming to reclaim their lost victim. And with a heart-stopping clarity, I screamed, "I choose," but the shadows surged violently toward me, snatching my voice and twisting it into their own, drowning my desperate choice within the chaos. Time seemed to stutter to a halt, and as the world around me imploded, light, darkness, shadows, and echoing cries all tore at the fabric of my being. What I had wanted to say echoed back as an unanswered plea, swallowed by the abyss. Then, silence hung heavy in the air. Suddenly, I felt an icy touch wrap around my throat, rendering me speechless. I gasped, but no sound emerged. The darkness loomed ever closer, a shroud that promised to consume me altogether. The light flickered once more, swirling into an oppressive nebula of misguided hope, and then, as everything spiraled in on itself, one truth burst forth as clearly as the dawn: I was no longer certain of who I really was, or who I had truly chosen to save. As darkness enveloped me completely, the last thing I saw was a face emerging from the shadows, gleaming with an unnatural grime, a face resembling my own, with a bone-chilling laugh that echoed eternally through the never-ending void. Everything went black. The darkness was all-consuming, a heavy silence that draped over my senses like a suffocating blanket. I floated in nothingness, trapped in a void where time and space bled together into an endless stream of despair. In that primordial silence, I was conscious, yet utterly alone, adrift in a realm untouched by light or warmth. Emerging from the blackness, whispers trailed like a gentle breeze, coaxing me to listen. Familiar voices interwove with unrecognizable tones, creating a haunting melody that sent shivers through my soul. They swirled around me, tantalizing echoes of laughter soon twisted into cries that grew louder, more distinct. You chose. A bitter wind began to howl, raking against my skin, and as it wrapped around me, recollections flooded in. The memories shifted like phantoms, manipulating the fabric of reality. Visions of my life before this horror, flickering images of faces I had loved and lost, marred by shadowy shapes that snatched them away just like they had tried to snatch me. Help us! A desperate cry emanated from the dark recesses of my mind, pulling me deeper into the swirling maelstrom. The plea belonged to the pale woman. She was a spectral tether to whatever was left of my humanity. But the shadows stirred with discontent, and their resentment simmered like an angry storm threatening to break. That I suddenly found myself caught in a net of swirling shadows, feeling the grasp of cold fingers tighten against my throat, dragging me deeper into their fold. Panic surged within me, and instinctively, I fought. As I struggled, more whispers rose, intoxicating and seductive, promising secrets and truths I had yet to uncover. Embrace the darkness, they coaxed. You control what happens next. The circles of shadows churned, contorting around me with primal energy, and within that chaos, I stumbled upon a vision, a distorted image of myself, or rather, the thing I had become. It wore my face but twisted into an expression of unyielding madness, its eyes glinting with malicious glee that made my heart race even faster. Embrace us. It howled, its voice a grotesque mimicry of my own pleading for freedom. You've chosen this. Desperately, I flailed against the icy tendrils that bound me. No. I was trying to save anyone. I pleaded, my voice barely forming amidst the cacophony. But the shadows had heard before. They had rendered countless souls into silence, feeding on doubt and despair. As I wrestled against their unwelcome affection, a blinding light began to pulse fiercely in the distance, a beacon through the murk. At its center stood the pale woman, her hair flowing like wisps of smoke, the swirling profundity of shadows unfurling around her form. You can't break free alone, she cried, her voice filled with a haunting mixture of hope and fear. You have to remember who you are. But within the dark, I couldn't find myself. No memories of joy or love pierced through the suffocating dread. The darkness coiled tightly, entwining around my thoughts, whispering sweet nothings that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. I felt it crawling into my mind, gnashing at the scraps of my identity, taunting me with twisted memories that weren't mine. You were forsaken the moment you chose darkness. The phantom image of myself cackled, now closer than I had ever wanted it to be. Its hand reached toward me, a grasp that felt both familiar and unfathomable. Let go of the light. Together, we are unbreakable. The ground beneath me quaked, as if the very substance of reality was thinning, ready to spill me into oblivion. No. I screamed, summoning a resolve I didn't know I possessed. I will find my way back. I refused to be lost. Fueled by raw desperation, I focused on the pale woman, the last vestige of clarity in this chaotic world. You can help me. You have to. With every ounce of strength unearthly and mortal, I shot toward the light. The shadows screamed in rage, clawing at me, seeking to reclaim their prize. I felt the icy tendrils snap against my skin as I drew nearer to the pale woman. Her robe gleamed like starlight, casting glimmers of hope even as the darkness churned, ravenous at my back. Just as I reached her, the shadows lunged, and with one final, bone-chilling laugh, they pulled me back into their embrace. The light flickered violently, dimming further until it became a mere glint in the engulfing night. all at once, the laughter ceased, and an eerie silence enveloped me. Sunken whispers rose like thick fog, speaking in tongues that clawed at my consciousness, and as darkness enveloped my vision completely, I felt an icy grip around my heart. The final words echoed in my ears, "You were never alone, but nor will you ever truly be free," and then, everything went dark once more, but as fragments of my consciousness faded, a solitary heartbeat thumped in the pitch-black void, a rhythm of dread that matched my own, pulsating in synchronized torment. It became the threnody of the abyss, echoing the question I had not yet dared to voice: was it really over? Just then, a chilling sensation crawled up my spine, something prickling against the back of my neck, fear blossoming. A warm the breath neither mine nor of this world, a slow, deliberate exhalation as a shadow approached. As it wrapped around me like a lover's embrace, I felt its lips graze my ear and whisper, "It's time to choose again." My heart raced, the rhythmic thumping echoing through the darkness, a frantic reminder of my existence in this hellish landscape. Choose again. The words whispered through my thoughts, but it wasn't merely an echo. It felt Olivia as if the shadows were not just a passive darkness but a sentient force, bent on coaxing me towards an unfathomable choice. That as the warm breath lingered, I couldn't help but crave to see what odor had unfurled in this mysterious void. With trembling resolve, I focused on that chilling whisper, absorbing its intention, attempting to grasp the tendrils of fear that wrapped around me. My vision sparked vibrantly, and suddenly, I was immersed in a scene, a grotesque tableau painted in shadows and flickering lights. That I stood in a dilapidated house, its air thick with dust and the decay of forgotten lives. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. Silhouettes slithered across walls where once there were family portraits, their faces obscured yet familiar. A slow, anguish-laden wail materialized around me, lamenting lost time and broken bonds. I could feel them pulling at my essence, memories clawing at my sanity, each moment weighed down with agonizing intensity. A board creaked beneath my feet, sending chills scuttling up my spine. Then, a voice broke through the atmosphere, casting a spotlight on dread. "You will suffer if you dwell. Remember, your choice is the price of your past." The faint echoes bore the haunting tones of laughter, twisted and malevolent, reverberating through the walls. I turned instinctively, drawn toward the source of the voice, an amalgamation of shadow and fright. From behind a tarnished mirror, something beckoned. It pulsed with an eerie glow, reflecting flickers of a once vibrant Liff, a young version of myself, staring wide-eyed in terror. But her reflection trembled and shuddered, distorted by a warped lens, imploring me with silent screams. "Help me!" she mouthed, her expression contorted, as if she were both pleading and warning. My heart shattered as the moment collided. I had abandoned her. I had chosen to escape instead of confronting the darkness back then. A sharp gasp rippled through me. "Who are you?" I croaked, choked by the weight of my own guilt. "Do you not remember?" The reflection hissed, her voice a snake's hiss that slithered into my ears. "You let them in, and now they want more. Choose or lose again." Just then, the house trembled violently, and the air turned frigid. Images rushed past me like a relentless tide, dark memories, screams of my lost loves, visions shrouded in pain. The figures of people I had known, once full of light, now faded into silhouettes, mouths opening and closing, beseeching me for compassion, for acknowledgement. "Your choice sealed our fates." They moaned in unison, their words wrapping around me like chains. That I staggered back. "I didn't know. I thought I could save you." My protests fell flat against the memories taunting me. The walls danced as shadows leapt, mocking my futile attempts to escape, rejoicing in my torment. Then, a sudden flare caught my eye, an opening at the heart of the house. A door, slightly ajar, lit by a chilling luminescence, called to me, offering a glimmer of hope. "Find the way back to the light," echoed the pale woman's promised solace, merging with the thousands of voices pleading for rescue. I moved toward the door, my heart pounding with both hope and terror. As I stepped cautiously forward, the shadows coiled tighter, wrapping around my limbs, biting like icy daggers. You can't leave us," they hissed, punctuating their voices with laughter like shards of glass. The warmth of the doorway beckoned, a memory of light, the pale woman standing sentinel. That I gritted my teeth, battling against the shadows, pushing forward when suddenly the door slammed shut. No. Damn it. I screamed, pounding against the wood, the taste of desperation filling my mouth. The laughter swelled, and the room shifted once more. My own voice joined the cacophony. Embrace the darkness. It echoed, warping into a chorus of horror. My hands fell to my sides, defeated, and in that moment of surrender, I felt something unsettling take hold. A tendril of shadow sifted through my thoughts, whispering secrets of the abyss. You can have everything back. Just yield. Sparks of memory ignited, thrumming with the pain of choices I had made. Suddenly, I saw the truth. The pale woman, the silhouettes, they were parts of me, captured in darkness. If I accepted their horror, they would be free, and perhaps I would escape too. But was there a way to choose both? A shiver ran down my spine as I looked around me, sensing that every fraction of breath could seal my fate. Just as I began to fold into their intoxicating allure, the door crashed open. That a figure stepped through, a grotesque amalgamation of the lost souls, grappling for air, their hollow eyes piercing through the darkness around me. Choose. They screamed, their voices melding into a cacophony of despair. Choose now, or forget everything. What stood before me was a nightmare come to life, pulsating with energy, hungry for something I could not yet comprehend. I trembled, heart racing, as the shadows pressed in, waiting for my answer. In that moment, I realized whether I chose to surrender or to resist, there was no salvation without consequence. The choice loomed over me, suffocating, and just as I braced myself to utter the only word that echoed in my mind, a shrill scream broke through the shadows. Help us! And then, all went silent, leaving only the echoes of my own heartbeat in the suffocating darkness, and a new, ominous voice whispered against the stillness, you wanted freedom, now you must pay the price. And with that chilling declaration, I felt the very fabric of reality begin to unravel. The ground trembled beneath me, a rhythmic pulse that mirrored my escalating dread. The figure before me, a wretched assembly of lost souls, stood impossibly still, their eyes dark voids that seemed to draw the very essence of light away from the room. Shadows coiled and writhed around them, blurring the lines between flesh and darkness, as if the entities were caught in a rift torn from the fabric of reality itself. Choose. They cried again, their voices scraping against my consciousness like nails across glass. With each syllable, I felt the energy in the air shift, thickening as if I was being enveloped by a suffocating fog crafted from my very own nightmares. The pale woman's face flashed before me, her haunting gaze flickering like a candle threatened by the storm. She didn't want to be abandoned again. What do I do? I gasped, my voice fragile against the walls, which echoed the agony of all those trapped within. The amalgamation moved closer, and I could feel the chill radiating from their twisted forms, the abyss stalling my escape. They spun a tale of despair around me, weaving together threads of loss, betrayal, and a darkness that pulsed with an insatiable hunger. To escape, you must face the truth, they uttered, their tones now a hypnotic lull that pulled at my instincts. But remember, the cost is steep. You may not recognize the path once it's forged. That I hesitated. For a split second, a glimmer of rebellion ignited within me. I refuse to succumb to this. I will not choose. I shouted defiantly. The moment I uttered those words, however, I felt the room shift again. The shadows reared back, recoiling as if wounded, and I could hear the angry whispers rising to a crescendo, swirling like a storm preparing to lash out. Fool! The souls screeched, suddenly lunging towards me, their mouths distending painfully, exposing gaping maws filled with nothing but darkness. You think you can deny us? You think you can escape the despair sown into your very being? A cold tendril of fear coiled around my heart as I stumbled back, but the voice of the pale woman resonated within me. In that moment, I recalled her compassion and the warmth she had offered. It became a fragile lifeline, urging me to remember who I once was, a source of light in the encroaching shadows. Just then, a surge of anger ignited in the depths of my soul. No! You won't take me! I yelled, countering their grasp. Channeling every ounce of strength I possessed, I pushed against the swirling darkness. As the light of my very essence flared against the encroaching mist, an unexpected sensation coursed through me, warmth blooming in defiance against the chilling void. The amalgamation of souls recoiled, their forms solidifying momentarily into faces I recognized. Faces of those I had lost, hairline fractures exposing the heartache we shared. Each person was twisted by their anguish, and for a brief flicker of time, their expressions reflected my own remorse, urging me to acknowledge the pain I had tried so desperately to bury. Embrace us. They implored, their united voices like a chorus of forlorn bells, resonating through the creaky wood around me. I reached out, desperate for connection, but every inch I moved was met with resistance, shadows pulling me back, gnarled hands grasping at my legs, seeking to hold me in an eternal embrace. You're stronger than this, I shouted, rallying against the tide of despair. You deserve to be free. As if stirred by my words, the darkness thickened, roaring with anger, the shadows now morphing into ravenous beasts with glowing eyes, searching for the slightest crack in my resolve. In the chaos, I saw the slight gleam of the door, that lingering promise of light, now shining brightly, a beacon in the nightmare. My foot found the floor, and I began to sprint toward it. The cacophony behind me exploded into a fit of rage, each footfall like a pulse beneath my feet, fueled by the ire of those trapped, unwilling to let me escape. As I reached for the handle, the door slammed shut before my eyes, the impact sending shockwaves through my trembling frame. The air crackled with interspersing whispers as shadows enveloped me, twisting and folding like starless galaxies reaching for my soul. Surrender or be lost. They roared, a tempest of despair swallowing my heart. In that suffocating moment, I felt the overwhelming grasp of the accumulated darkness threatening to snuff out the last spark of my willpower. But then, something extraordinary happened. From within the depths of my being, a radiant light emerged, a pulse of clarity cutting through the agony. I choose to remember. I cried, the words exploding from my lips, each syllable igniting the air around me. The shadows recoiled in disbelief, their howls mixing with something deeper, something more ancient. The door shuddered violently, as if the very fabric of reality was being forced open, light spilling through the seams. The amalgamation surged forward, forming an impenetrable wall, desperate to snuff out the very source of my hope. You will regret this. A voice from the dark hollered, its tendrils of despair curling around my heart one last time. Just as I braced myself for what would come next, a sinister chuckle enveloped my senses. Then, against all odds, the door burst open with a blinding flash, and I stumbled forward, teetering on the precipice of salvation. But as I did, the figures of my lost loved ones surged past me, their faces twisted in agony and betrayal, drowning in shadows, their eyes locked onto mine with desperate fervor. You chose the light, now you will lose us forever. They wailed, the sound piercing the air like shards of ice, and with one final, harrowing scream, they thrust their hands toward me, pulling at my consciousness, threatening to drag me back into the void. I felt myself slipping, the brilliant light fading as the shadows closed in once more, leaving me with a chilling ultimatum: choose again, choose to forsake everything you hold dear, or prepare for the darkness that waits. And just then, everything went black. The whispers began before I even opened my eyes. They fluttered like moths around a flame, chilling my blood and binding me with unnameable dread. I was submerged in darkness, wrapped within a cocoon of shadows, where reality twisted and contorted like a grotesque mural painted in hues of despair. My body felt heavy, anchored by an invisible weight, my mind struggling to shake off the shroud of nightmares as I fought to break free. When clarity cracked open my consciousness, I was struck by the harrowing realization of where I was, another plane of existence, one that smelled of urine and rot, a grotesque cemetery for the souls that had slipped between moments. I rose on shaky legs, glancing around and finding dozens of tormented faces staring back at me, eyes dull yet brimming with the abyss of their unshed anguish. They were trapped, just as I had been, and I could feel their desolation serrating the very air around us. Help us. Their voices crawled over one another, weaving a tapestry of madness and sorrow. You must choose, save us or save yourself. Panic surged within me. I felt the specters of despair pull at my heart, clenching it in a vice, prompting me to understand the depth of their suffering. With each heartbeat, I could sense their stories: the families lost, the lives unlived, the moments that had unraveled into nothing. I staggered back, overwhelmed and haunted, my choice creeping toward me like mist on the horizon. I understood now I had entered not just a physical space of horror, but the crucible of all the choices I had ever made, a prison for souls clad in the very fabric of my being, and just as I began to process the weight of my truth, the pale woman emerged from the sea of shadows, her luminescent gaze piercing the fog of despair. "You sacrificed your sanity before, but this time it's different," she warned, her voice a chilling him filled with urgency. "You must wield the choice. It has the power to either save them or seal their doom forever." What choice? My mind raced, every fragment of clarity screaming through the fog. I tried to grasp her meaning, but the shadows crowded closer, festering whispers slithering through the air. "Save us! Save us!" Their cries exploded, a cacophony of anguish pulling me deeper into the maw of existence. But as I fought against their embrace, I knew the truth. Each soul lost in this realm was a part of me, entangled in the fabric of what I had become. No. I shouted, my voice splintering through the chaos. "I can't choose. I can't sacrifice anyone." An agonizing silence fell over the gathering, the moment stretching taut until the shadows lanced toward me with an insatiable hunger, their faces morphing in rage and despair. "Choose. Or they will suffer forever." The air became thick, distorting, swirling in a tempest of emotion that mirrored the relentless struggle within my soul. The ground quaked beneath me, splintering into chasms that threatened to swallow everything whole. As sunlight filtered through a crack in the overwhelming dark, I saw flashes of lost moments, me childhood, my love, the faces of friends now forgotten, each memory etched into the depths of my mind, begging for recognition and chained to these horrors. Choose. It was a mere whisper now, soft and deadly, waiting for my response, compelled to plunge me into despair or elevate me into an identity reborn. My heart thundered in my ears as I cast my gaze toward the pale woman, flooding my consciousness with uncertainty. I would rather risk anything else than see more souls falter, to witness their agony taint the echoes of the living. And then, a surge of warmth rippled through me, a connection blooming like a distant star igniting fire. That pure force was power in its rawest form, a decree to thin the stalking blackness pressing upon me. I reached into that light, fighting back against the oppression with every ounce of my will. "I choose to fight." I cried out, the words resonating through the thrumming abyss. The shadows seemed to convulse, recoiling from the force of my resolve. "You cannot choose light without cost." They shrieked, their voices melding into a singular, throaty howl that clawed at my sanity. "Every choice will take its toll," but in that moment of defiance, I saw something deeper. With the light that pulsed in my chest, I could rewrite this tale not as a mere spectator within my own dream but as the architect of my escape. "I choose." I roared defiantly, feeling the anguished souls biting at my flesh, desperate for acknowledgement. "Let me save them all." What happened next plunged me into a maelstrom of chaos. The ground beneath me cracked wide open, revealing a rift bathed in a radiant light deeper than anything I'd ever comprehended. Hands reached out from the shadows, tangible yet ethereal, filled with anguish, clenching at my wrists as tendrils of darkness latched onto my heart, leaving me breathless. "Choose us." They screeched, those shadowy faces spilling forth from the void, each bearing desperation that seared into my heart. They were all parts of meth fragments I did not want to confront, but as I looked deeper into that rift, I finally understood. I didn't have to choose anyone over the other. I was more than this torment, a part of all those souls and something altogether different. With a swell of power that eclipsed my fears, I let my soul reach out. "That I bind us together." I screamed as the pulsing light engulfed me, illuminating the faces of those whose lives taught me lessons buried deep. I wanted all of us to be whole again, to embrace the pain that had unfurled into growth and healing. Shadows and light clashed, a force of creation arising out of despair. The darkness screamed in protest, but as the light engulfed it, the temperatures began to warm. The faces twisted together, curling tighter until they fused into a tapestry of souls soaring toward the light above. I am woven with them, a constellation of shared destinies. In that moment, I felt not just the agony of past choices but the beauty of connected rebirth. It became clear that I could wear the weight of those choices, embrace all of them as one. Their despair, their love they could rejoin, coalesce like rivers merging into the ocean, and so as the shadows breathed their last, giving way to the white-hot radiance, I felt the strains of sacrifice rip through me, separating my consciousness from the ties of my past. The darkness recoiled in defeat as it dissolved under the brilliance of acceptance, but in the mellowness of that victory, a chilling truth flickered into existence. A lingering whisper echoed one final time, the voice of doom intertwined with unrelenting laughter. You won, yet the choice remains. The ground quaked beneath my feet as rays of darkness poured back into the rift. Not all was finished. With the last vestiges of shadows curling around me, I turned and faced the pale woman, whose expression reflected both relief and fear. In the blinding light, her face flickered, and something dawned as gradually she stepped away. Now you must strive to break from the cycle, and just like that, with a chilling clarity resounding at the edge of my consciousness, I knew I was free, yet the horror still loomed behind me like a crescent moon eclipsing the sun. That I thought I had found my way through the darkness, but beneath it churned an ancient hunger, silently awaiting the moment when it could push me back to that crossroads once more. Those fateful decisions forever echoing in the depths of my mind. As I took a trembling breath, the chilling air ushered the final truth that clutched around my heart, binding my very essence. It was never just a choice, it was a beginning, an end, and perhaps, a fateful return. The shadows would always linger, urging me to repeat the cycle, forever waiting for my next mistake. And just before the fading light swallowed me whole, I heard the echoes of my own voice whisper into that engaging abyss, a haunting reminder that choice would always demand its price. You will never be free.